has been doing an incredible job here at NCC. She works on their small groups team. She has been part of the small group network, helping us out in many, many ways with her gift set. But one of the great things that we get to do is use their primary gift set, which is teaching. And so she's going to run you through this next section, and then I'll bring you on home. So, Kirsten, give her a big hand. Come on.
Good morning. I hope you guys got some good rest. And any cool dinner places that y'all went to last night?
McDonald's.
What? McDonald's. Anything that's maybe DC specific? Shout it out.
The one you recommended, what is it called? Farmbird?
Farmbird. You went to Farmbird. That's awesome.
It was good.
Good. Farmbird's one of my favorites for their chicken. But welcome back to day 2. We have another jam-packed day full of planning and purposes. And I'm so excited that we get to spend the whole day together. So again, my name is Kirsten. I'm a small group director at one of our locations at NCC. I'm also a regional leader and a blogger for the Small Group Network. I've been a part of the Small Group Network for about 2 years now. And today we're going to actually be walking through and following along in the red book. So if I'm mentioning page numbers or go to this chapter, unless I say it is the white book, it is automatically the red book. And we're going to start on page 81 in the red book that opens up with the kitchen. Ron Wilber says this: if you are not intentionally helping people get to God's destination, then you're just in the way. And the kitchen is ideally about congregating and connecting. So on every other Friday night, Matt and I, my husband, we have a small group that meets. And for whatever reason, they always congregate in the kitchen. I'm not kidding. The first time that we hosted this group, after several weeks, Matt and I were like, why do they always want to congregate in the smallest room of the house? Like, we have a whole house at smallest, next to the bathroom, but that would just be weird to congregate and connect in the bathroom. So, but they always circle in the kitchen, and it's just like, why are we in the kitchen? But there's food there, right? And so what better way to connect over food? So today we're going to be covering the following questions. How will you align your small group ministry with other church leadership and ministries? How will you communicate the value of groups to your church? And what is your plan for connecting people into groups? And lastly, how will you measure your progress? So the home that I was referencing that we are living in Capitol Hill, we haven't always lived here since we've been in DC. This was actually a home that we prayed about for 3 years. Now, if you know anything about the DC housing market, you know that it is very, very challenging to get a home in DC. And I'm not talking about buying, I'm just talking about renting a home. If you don't sign the document the moment you walk through for a tour, it's gone. There's no option. And then number 2, the prices. They are so expensive in the DC market, and they're constantly going up. And so this was something that we couldn't afford. So we prayed for 3 years to be able to have a home, but we prayed for the sake of community. Now, I was still working at NCC, but I was commuting an hour and a half from Maryland each way. It's ridiculous, but it came with challenges. So even though I loved my job and didn't like my commute, the other thing that we really didn't like is the fact that our community on the weekend was different than our community during the week. And we lived in an apartment, so people couldn't just come in as they please. And I was raised with a value of hospitality in my home. My neighbors and our friends knew that my mom loved to cook for everybody, literally everybody. If they weren't invited over to dinner, they knew that by 8 o'clock they could come knock on the door and say, do you have any leftovers? Hospitality was a huge value in our home. And so our prayer was, I wanted a home where people could come in and come out. And then we got the home. And it was a crazy story how we got it. It was a little bit unexpected than what we were planning. But then God brought the community. And that is the same community that meets in our kitchen, that congregates every other Friday night. And so that home has begun to mean so much to us. Ephesians 2:19 through 22 says, "So now you Gentiles are no longer strangers and foreigners. You are citizens along with all of God's holy people. You're members of God's family. Together we are his house, built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, and the cornerstone is Christ Jesus himself. We're carefully joined together in him, becoming a holy temple for the Lord. Through him, you Gentiles are also being made part of this dwelling, where God lives in his Spirit." The thing is that we are God's family, and he makes his home in our community together. God himself is at home and in us as we are united and connected together. And much of Ephesians is about bringing two groups of the Jews and Gentiles together as one people in Christ. The kitchen brings people together. It's a source of hospitality, a gathering place to nourish and connect people through relationships. So today we're going to be walking through all the nuts and bolts of ministry. What better way to describe than actually by kicking off with watching this video? And there's no sound. Okay, ministry is rough. Ministry is hard. Connecting is hard. And you guys all had a reaction to the person who got hit. My reaction is, who was filming this and why didn't you stop? Like, who was the person on the other side?
My reaction was, why wasn't the dog doing his job?
Why wasn't the dog doing his job? There you go. All right, let's dive into question 1. How will you align your small group ministry with other church leadership and ministries? Now, before talking about connecting with others, we want to focus on how well you're connected to other ministries and your senior leadership. On page 29 in your book, we will be focusing on weekend services that are delivering relevant teaching. This is for the vision part. Specialty groups ministries, providing for the need of responsibility. This is for the value part. And then balanced small groups that are provided for the need of relationship. So how well are you aligning the ministries in your church with the senior leadership, with other ministries, with your weekend services? Now, when talking about alignment, we're ideally talking about the senior leadership of the church, your lead pastor. I know that that's not always the case, so start with your ministry leaders. In God's providence, these 3 church systems respond with 3 significant felt needs, and they are relevance, relationship, and responsibility. So the goal is to not go off course. You want to constantly keep moving towards alignment, aligning your plans and your activities with your small group vision and mission. You want to build your ministry in a way that is aligning with the senior leadership, that's aligning with the vision that they have. And one practical way to do this is the 10-80-10% principle. 10%, you want to start and end with having a conversation with your senior leadership to ensure that you are fully in line and fully on board with their vision. The 80% is what you do with your team and with other ministry leaders day in and day out. So think for a moment, reflect. What am I doing to make sure that I am in alignment with vision, mission, values of the senior leadership? Am I practicing this 10-80-10 principle? How am I leading? And where are you at in terms of the stages? You might be doing a walk, crawl, run stage. Where are you at on that map? And all of us are going to be at different stages. So some of you might just be running towards that alignment. Others of you are just taking those first initial crawl steps towards that alignment. Now, in your book, there's a list of 7 attributes that will help you best align with small group ministry, and they'll tell you how you can initiate to connect with the house to house to the temple courts. Because the bottom line is, if people know your heart, they're more inclined to listen. If they're more inclined to listen, then you have influence through relationships. So, the first one is to display humility, not entitlement. Be a friend, not a competitor. No one likes it when there's territorialism or entitlement. There isn't room for that in ministry. Here at NCC, we have a core value that unity it's recognizing it's a result of corporate humility, right? Everyone likes to work with people who are humble. Be humble with where God has called you, where God has placed you, the gifts He has given you. Trust Him that at the right time, He'll put you at the right seat, at the right table, in the right conversations. And I think that that's a good display of humble confidence. And then pray like it depends on God, because it does, and work like it depends on you, because it does. 2, appeal to the interests of others. Learn the love language of your senior leadership. So for Steve, he knows that Pastor Rick always wants to hear about class and baptisms. I know for my campus pastor, he wants to hear about stories. I actually have a stories folder on my computer that I keep track of stories so that I know I can periodically send to my campus pastor. Why? Because I want to accomplish his goals. I want to be in alignment with his vision. Proverbs 16:21, the wise are known for their understanding, and pleasant words are persuasive. 3, earn a reputation of responsibility and respect. I emphasized earn, not ask, right? Prove to be a team player. Steve was talking about this yesterday. Are you on a sports team? Have you played on a sports team so that you know how to operate as team players? Support your church's culture. Integrate them into your plans. And at the end of the day, the effort and the commitment is what will speak volumes more than you trying to force something or to earn something in a specific way. So when you show up day in and day out, people notice that. When you show up when they don't expect you to, people notice that. John Maxwell says that 80% of success is just showing up. If you continue to show up day in and day out, you will earn responsibility and respect. All right, 4, honesty. You'll maintain secure relationship if you're vulnerably honest. And I'm talking about being honest with the successes, honest with the failures. Be an open book. One of my mentors, he said to me before, never have your boss be caught off guard. Like, don't keep anything as a surprise to them. Always be having ongoing, honest, authentic conversations with them. 5, consider your timing. Don't be so task-focused that you lose sight of the timing and you're no longer able to think through, what is the best time that I can share them with this. For example, you don't want to go up to the lead pastor as he's about to set foot on stage to preach a weekend service to say, what do you think if we changed this in small groups? Probably not the best timing. Or, everybody knows you don't go to the grocery store hungry if you skipped a meal. You're going to end up with cheesecake, cookies, and cheese and meats that you didn't anticipate that were not on your list. You don't go to the grocery store hungry. 6, trust God. God is sovereign and in control. And just be faithful with what He's entrusted you with. So be a good steward of your resources and your relationships. Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding, but seek His will in all you do, and He'll show you which path to take. Remind yourself of your calling. Take it seriously, that what God has called you to, He has asked you to fulfill. Steward that calling. Trust Him. If you need to remind yourself regularly, why am I doing what I'm doing? At NCC, we actually call it altars because we have these altar moments in our lives, and we see all throughout Scripture these altars of moments where people either set up a stone or they said, this is where the Lord helped us, or this is what the Lord has done for us. I don't want to forget this. I want to remember this. We all need to be reminded and remind ourselves continually of why we're doing what we're doing and what God's call is on our lives. So, actually, you're in Ebenezer's Coffee House, which is an altar for our church, because in 1 Samuel 7:12, it says, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." It says Ebenezer's. Ebenezer's means, thus far the Lord has helped us. So every time we walk into the coffee house, we are reminded that God is our helper. In fact, for those of you who got coffee with a hot coffee with the sleeves, this morning, if you'll check the upper right corner, it says 1 Samuel 7:12. Because we want to be reminded to trust God, to trust these altar moments in our lives. So why are you at the church you're at? Remind yourself. Why are you doing what you're doing? Remind yourself. How has God called you? Remind yourself. And then 7, remember your true identity. So is my security in my title? Is it in what I do? Ultimately, your identity, your calling is in Christ Jesus. When you know your calling, you don't bail early on when you can't see what God is doing. God says, do you trust my calling that I've put on your life enough? Do you trust me? Because your identity and your calling is in Christ. All right, that's a quick overview of 7 attributes. You can also check out the podcast that Steve has done called 7 Ways to Lead Effective Small Group Ministry When Your Lead Pastor It May Not Be on Board. However, I would also say that those 7 attributes are also good whether or not your pastor is on board. It's because they're all working towards the alignment of the church. So there's an exercise in your workbook at the bottom that's an alignment scale. On the left-hand side, it is completely unaligned. Nobody knows their mission. On the right-hand side, fully aligned. Every single person knows their mission and can repeat it back to you. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes. I want you to work through, where do you fall on that scale? Are you saying, yep, I'm completely in line with my mission? Or I have no idea what the mission even is. And then where does your church stand on that scale? Give you guys a couple of minutes. Just mark yourself and your church. And then everyone did say, oh yeah, fully aligned, right on the dot. All right, you want to share? How about where you're personally at in the alignment process? Someone just shout it out or raise your hand. Pretty aligned?
Yeah, pretty aligned.
Okay.
Not all the way, but.
Yep.
Yeah, really.
Okay, helpful. Anybody else? 3/4, okay. Anybody else? Was this an easy exercise or was it a little bit challenging? Okay. All right, well, here's the thing. Part of this is drift management, because even if you think you're fully aligned, there's always some area that you're not quite aligned, right? Steve says that it is like a chiropractor. Chiropractors are always in the business of aligning. If you're aligned somewhere, you're misaligned somewhere else. So always keep working towards this alignment and owning the drift management. Question 2, how will you communicate the value of groups to your church? Now, there are 4 different areas that you can evaluate, and I want you to do an honest audit of these areas. The first one is touch points. Do an audit of all of your touch points. If you were to think through everything, websites, flyers, business cards, kiosks, bulletins, social media, apps, whatever it might be, evaluate any interface that has to do with customer service, because this is a part of first impressions. And then do a full audit of it. I will say for our team, I know that our Achilles heel is our group's website. We are constantly revamping that, and we're constantly saying, okay, we're so much farther than we were, but it's still not where it needs to be. We need to just keep working towards it, working towards it. So what touch points of yours communicate value to the community? 2, testimonies. A testimony is a satisfied customer. Just ask Chick-fil-A. How many Chick-fil-A fans do we have in the room?
Yeah.
Yes, Chick-fil-A is amazing. So what do they always say after you say thank you?
My pleasure.
My pleasure. They're in the business of a satisfied customer every time. When you go to a restaurant, do you check the reviews on Yelp before you go, or do you just say, I'm going to walk and just pop in? Most people check reviews on Yelp. Most people are more focused on the reviews than they are any other ad that they have seen about the restaurant. I tend to judge a restaurant by their bread, but that's a different story. So what are the reviews on your church? Have you ever gone to Yelp and looked at the reviews of your church to know what your customers are saying? I know, right? It's important. It's very important. So a few ways that you can further capture small group testimonies are if you are in a conversation with someone, and Paul is telling you this incredible story of what's happened in his small group, do everything you can in that moment to capture that story. Because the moment both of you leave, life gets busy. You're going to forget. Jot down their name. Pull out your phone. Record their testimony on the spot. Take a picture. Jot it all down in an email to send to somebody. Capture it in that moment and take initiative, because these are powerful resources. You can use these testimonies anywhere. I actually did this for one of our alpha groups. I pulled a few people and I said, tell me what Alpha has done in your life. Just a quick 30-second. And then I sent it to our media team, and they put together all of these testimonies. That's the most, I watched the whole thing and I just wanted to cry. It was so beautiful because I captured it in the moment. Number 3, timely sermons. The threads of community and relationships are woven throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. The word one another is used 58 times. So how do I capitalize on what they're talking about? What baseline curriculum could we be using? What could we create and develop to align with weekend services? Think about Hallmark. What does Hallmark do? They create cards for just about everything. Might be $8 a card, but they create cards for everything. So I grew up thinking that in October, Sweetest Day was a real holiday. Does anyone know what Sweetest Day is?
No.
Where are you from?
Buffalo, New York.
Okay, that's why. So I grew up thinking Sweetest Day was a real holiday. My parents would like make this event out of it, and they would get cards and chocolates for each other. And so I left, I was in Midwest, and then moved to Pennsylvania. And I left Pennsylvania, and I was like, no one knows what Sweetest Day is? You've got to be kidding me. It's not a real holiday. Hallmark just made it up to have reasons to, and my parents bought into it, to buy a Sweetest Day card. Think about sermons. What can you do to create reasons for people to engage? New year might mean new groups. February might mean you start couples or relationship groups. The summer might be boating groups. Give people reasons to engage with what your pastor is teaching about. And then figure out what curriculum is transferable. Number 4, teaching pastors. The most impactful thing is for small groups is when the teaching team is sharing about their small groups. When they're sharing personal, real stories that they are a part of. So at your church, you might have a pastor who maybe mentions small groups from the platform every single week. You might have a pastor who mentions it every quarter. That's okay, as long as it's intentional. It doesn't matter how many times, but to have it be intentional makes a difference in the world. I mean, our senior pastor, Mark Batterson, he will regularly be intentional about communicating small groups in some way or another. So if you're on the teaching team at your church, if you have a platform, communicate about small groups in any way you can, whether it is from the platform or whether it is through conversation. Make sure you're always talking about small groups. All right, question number 3. What is your plan for connecting people in groups? If any of you know me in the room, you know that I am one of the biggest Disney fans. I've been to Disney more times than the years that I've been alive. And in 2 weeks, I'm about to go on a Disney cruise, so I am stoked. But the thing that I love about Disney is the customer service. I love how Disney goes above and beyond with customer service. I mean, I can have everything linked to my Magic Band so that when I swipe on a ride, they say, "Happy anniversary, Kirsten. We're so glad you're here." Wow. How did you know that? Or I can swipe in my Magic Band to pay for dinner. They just go above and beyond. They help connect me to all of the parks. They help connect me to the right people. And then they take care of me during the stay. And see, that's what it's about. It's about the customer service. So how are you connecting people? What does your customer service look like? I'm so passionate about leadership and bettering customer service wherever I go, because I believe that the church can collectively give excellent customer service in order to connect people to groups. Eric Greger says, no one should outpace the church in developing leaders because no one else has the assurance that their contribution will last, that their leadership will eternally matter. The leadership process of connecting people is all about customer service that eternally matters. So in this section, I want you to think through 2 questions. 1, what is our decision tree? And 2, what is the role of multiplication? Melissa moved to DC a couple of years ago. She came to NCC and said, you know what, this feels like a really safe place. It's convenient. I love being able to walk here. You know, I'm gonna step up. And we had a conversation. And she said, well, how can I get connected? And I said, you know, I really think that you should try Alpha. Alpha is a group that if you have questions about the faith, that's a great way to get plugged in. So she did, she joined Alpha. And I remember her coming in one night and she said, man, I'm gonna need to go see the doctors. I might need surgery. My shoulder is in so much pain. I don't know what to do. And then she had this thought. Maybe, just maybe, God could heal her in Alpha. And so she asked one of her group leaders if they would pray for her to heal her arm. She walked out with a completely healed arm. And then she said, oh, my dad is about to go through a triple bypass surgery. I wonder if we could pray for healing for him too. Maybe he would get healed. Her dad didn't know Christ at the time. And her dad walked out without surgery, and the doctors were so amazed. They said, we've never seen anything like this. You see, that experience in that group was so powerful and so meaningful to Melissa that she said, I want to then go and create that for other people so that other people can connect to small groups. So then she led a small group for women. And then God called her to Texas, and we still stay in touch. And anyone that she comes in contact with, but they say, oh, I'm moving to DC, she sends them to NCC. She's still regularly listening to podcasts. and she is helping others connect in Texas. It's an incredible story about how Melissa got connected into small groups and what God did in her life and transformed in the lives around her. And here's the bottom line. Customer service always has a ripple effect. One connection that I made for Melissa allowed God to transform her life and others' lives and others' lives and others' lives. Plans for connecting people matter. They matter to God, they matter to us, they matter for the purpose of small groups. Now, second question I said was, well, how do we handle multiplication? In this white book, Small Groups with Purpose, in chapter 8, it talks about a rapid cell multiplication method. And what that means is one group then makes 2, 2 makes 4, 4 makes 8, and so on. Now, this method doesn't work for every single church. In fact, Saddleback has said this doesn't work for our church. NCC has said this doesn't work for our church. So if it works for you, use it. But if it doesn't, there are other ways. In fact, sometimes it just causes you to create a new strategy. And this is what Saddleback had to do. They listened to people who said, this group, it means so much to me. It's closer than my blood. They listened to those felt needs. And it makes sense because biblical fellowship is often based on the family system. Now, currently in our culture, there are 5 things that shatter the family system that we know. And likely, many of us have experienced at least one of these in our lives. The first one is the primary one that's divorce. National average is 40%. I am sure, if not you, someone you know has gone through a divorce. DC average is 31%, a little bit different than the national average, but we also have a lot of singles within the DC metro area. They all say the same thing. This small group is my family. Just as Saddleback said, this is closer than my blood. Number 2, step families. They're the largest dividers of the family system. A 2015 census said 50% of kids under the age of 18 are in a step family environment. Military environments. If you live near a base, you know that that is transient. That transient culture is what disrupts the family system. We're surrounded by several bases here. We have the White House and the Pentagon, many others, where there's just constant transient nature. Business. If you're in corporations that like to relocate people, if you're married to someone who works for corporate, that is all a part of moving the family system. Higher education. If you move away for higher education, if your kids move away for higher education, and if you're doing it right, the people in your small group will say, this is family. I have found the right group. But then, if you're doing this rapid multiplication method, sometimes you can walk into that and make it really uncomfortable and say, okay, and now I want you to go over here and you to go over here and start your own groups. And then the people are looking at you like, why would you do this? I found my family. Like, why are we being disconnected? And so that becomes a real challenge though. Because part of the Great Commission is go. So how do we do this? Well, at Saddleback, they say, you know what? Stay together as long as you want. Seriously. Stay together as long as you want. As long as personal evangelism is at the forefront of your group. Now, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth later on. But 2 themes I want you to remember. Branching over birthing and addition over division. And then we're going to think through strategies for connecting people. That is all found in chapters 14 through 17 of this book. And it doesn't matter where the groups are meeting. Groups can meet wherever and whenever. Because more important than the system that's used is the desired result. And that is spiritual growth and health. And we talked about that yesterday. So at NCC we have a group called FSAT, for such a time as this. 7:15 a.m. on Tuesday mornings, they meet at the Ways and Means Library. It's for Hill staffers and politicos. You can meet wherever, whenever. And so we're going to get into the pragmatics of how to connect people. We're talking about how to start groups with their friends. We also talked about yesterday how to have a church with small groups is a connection strategy. How to have a church of small groups is a campaign strategy. But you have to have a system in place to be able to plan for the connecting to happen. If you don't have a plan, it won't succeed the way that it can. Studies show us that you need to see something 9 times before you take action on something. So you have to know your plan and you have to repeat your plan. Proverbs 21:5, careful planning puts you ahead in the long run. So let's talk about campaigns at Saddleback. Since 2002, campaigns have increased small group participation from 30% to 110%. Since 2004, they have had more people in small groups than attend their weekend services. What an incredible vision. Outside of campaigns, you can offer things like Saddleback with a starter kit where they just say, you know what, start a group with a couple of your friends, work through this kit, and that forms a group. You could do sermon discussion guides. Our team writes sermon discussion guides every single weekend. We all know you sit in the back at services, you write your questions, send them in by 2 p.m. on a Sunday because we got groups going out by 4 p.m. You could make resources available to them. Also offer a way for people to join a group via card, via online. You can see several examples in pages 99 through 105. But the 3 strategies for connecting people are tied to this. 1, you must actively recruit for your small group ministry. 2, continuously invite to start or join a group. 3, appeal to everyone's felt need for relationship.
Are
You
these
can-
in the book somewhere, or?
They are not. You want me to repeat them? I don't think they are.
Yes.
Actively recruit for your small group ministry. Continuously invite to start or join a huddle. A group, sorry. Appeal to everyone's felt need for relationship. Actively recruit, continuously invite, appeal to felt need. Yes?
Curious why the term felt need instead of just need.
Yeah, so we had talked about the felt needs just a little bit before about how to engage with people in a way that, remember when they said, they're closer than my blood? That was a deep, deep felt need that people were feeling that we needed to create something around to make sure we were meeting that need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering why is the word felt? Because if you might have a need that you don't really recognize, is that what, so felt just means you recognize your need?
I mean, I'll jump in. Part of what happens is everyone has different needs, but there are needs, and it's used like any adjective or adverb to bring emphasis to a word. And so you can have a need, I'm hungry, you may have a need for food or water, basic things like that. But what gives the 168 hours, because that's what we're all after. You're after that 168 hours. What triggers that, where I'm going to give you, you're going to go up on my priority list, or I'm going to give it, is when that's a felt need that's inherent to my spiritual nature. It's not a basic need like that you may have, but it's intrinsic to your spiritual being.
Great question. Thanks for asking. So adult Sunday school, you might use this at your church. This is one strategy. It's in chapter 15 of this book. And basically, you can do Sunday school and small groups at the same time. They can coexist as long as they are not competing with each other. So some pros is that it's convenient. It's right there. You might have childcare as an option that people can take advantage of. But the downfall is that there are some time constraints with a Sunday school, or the unchurched might be less likely to come. A connection event strategy, that's a second strategy, chapter 16 of this book. Saddleback does a centralized space where they invite people all into one space. They're sitting at different tables. They have a curriculum that they can work through via video, and they actually ask the participants at the table, well, who do you want to be the leader of this group? That's a great sense of group ownership, right? It's easy to put someone in place in leadership, quick connections. But on the other hand, it might be less than ideal situations for the table if that table is not one of the strongest tables, right? And so there are pros and cons to either one. Here at NCC, we just had a rooted group come out of our Alpha group all on its own. So the people in Alpha said, we want to keep going, we want to continue, let's start, you're the leader, and we're going to have a rooted group. That's another option for a connection event. And then campaign strategy, chapter 17 in the white book. And here we're talking about one of the most powerful strategies. But you have to have all key ingredients in this strategy. For my husband's 30th birthday, I made something I'd never made before. I was going to surprise him. I was super excited. Homemade cinnamon rolls. If you have not made homemade cinnamon rolls and you try for the first time and you are not a pro baker, you may end up with yeast that doesn't work and you have cinnamon cookies, not rolls. Every ingredient matters in the campaign strategy. So we do this as an alignment series. You might call it campaign at your church. We call it alignment series. We're literally kids ministry, worship ministry, adult discipleship is all on the same page. When Mr. Rogers' Won't You Be My Neighbor came out, we did a series that says, Who is my neighbor? And literally every single department of the church was fully on board with this. And it was so exciting because we took a movie and then we created an opportunity for people to engage. It was a cross between the Mr. Rogers as well as, if you guys have read The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker, fantastic book if you haven't read that yet. But our kids would come home every single week and they would have an assignment where they would map out, these are the houses in my neighborhood, this is who lives there, this is how I can pray for them. And the adults were doing the same thing. Who is your neighbor? How does Jesus love his neighbors? How did he treat his neighbors? And so we were working through an alignment series. Now, a couple of tips for a campaign. You can do it one time a year. You don't need to do it more frequently than one time a year. Have a clear start and end date. Align children, student, adult ministries all on the same page. Celebrate after the campaign to say, look, this is what the Lord has done. Celebrate the people who worked to pull off the campaign to make it happen. Just as a reminder from yesterday, does anybody remember what is the number one requirement for people to lead a small group in the church? Followers, yes, which are friends, yes. Okay, so yesterday we said if someone isn't a follower of Christ and they come up and they say, hey, I would really like to use this curriculum and lead this group, can I? Well, we say yes, because they're people who, number one, have influence because they have friends who might not know Christ, and two, because it's all a part of the process that discipleship is messy. It's all a part of getting them from the come and follow me to the come and die for me. And we want to help people get to that stage. But it's messy. It's not this perfect linear line where you're just taking a step forward, taking a step forward, taking it. Like oftentimes, it's a step forward, it's a step over to the side, it might be a step back, like it's all over the place. You are helping them walk through that discipleship process. All right, so you might, I've mentioned sermon discussion questions, you might give them video curriculum. You might say, you know what, this is controlled curriculum, so why don't, they could use that. Then you know exactly what they're going to be learning, when they're going to be learning it, how they're going to be going through it. You might incorporate that second or third week call to Christ that Steve talked about with the man that he baptized, so that people can actually accept Christ in a new way through that curriculum that you've written. What Saddleback does is that they just don't post it on the website. They will then make sure that it is, it just doesn't go live, and so you have groups that are able to not go on the website, groups that are able to go on the website. We call it a different language at NCC where they're like do not promote groups. So we've got our open groups and then our do not promote groups. They don't automatically feed into the website. This is easy, easy, easy. It's all a part of Saddleback's campaign strategy. You want to lead a group? Great, grab 2 friends. But You know the expression like don't box God in? At the same time, we don't want to create a system that boxes people out. So we want to remain open. Do you have followers? They say yes, great, grab 2 friends. If they say no, then they probably want to join a group, not lead a group. Saddleback was the first to pull off a successfully use of a campaign strategy encompassing weekend sermons, small group curriculum, student programs, children activities, social media. The campaign strategy is what enabled the church leadership to tap into exponential thinking. So you might be thinking to yourself, I've got a few questions. How big can a group get? Hey, I'm so glad you asked. Honestly, that's not exactly what we're more concerned about in terms of size or numbers. We're concerned about the equipping and the empowering of the health of the group. If you can focus on the health of the group, then the size will fall in line. So a couple of things that I want you to think through. The higher the number, the lower the care. If not everyone is talking, the group is too big. You're meeting in a place where we have a small group that meets here, and small, we have 60 people who meet in this small group. They have dinner together, they watch a movie together. After that, they break up into subgroups, just as you guys are, and the conversation, the discussion happens within the subgroup, not all one collectively. So keep that in mind, because you want everyone talking. If you want ideas for new group follow-up, you can go to page 100 in the Red Book. Sorry, helping people join a group. You can see page 104 in the Red Book. But just a couple of other things to keep in mind. Other stimuli for new groups might be something like seasons. You might want to follow seasons of your church, seasons of your environment. Leverage these natural rhythms that are taking place within the church and culture, because people who are in season are more receptive to groups. At NCC, we run off of a semester system because of the congressional calendar. We are fully in line with that. Struggles. The higher the trauma, the greater need for focused care. People are more susceptible to growth in a struggle. Significant results. So newborns, or significant events, newborns, empty nesters. Campaigns can form easily out of these groups. And then the last one, spiritual steps. Class, baptism, new believer, mission trips. Are people coming out of baptism and saying, hey, you know what, I'd really like to start a small group? That's a great opportunity. Whatever it is, just make sure it's scalable and that it's balanced with those 5 purposes. Whatever your goal is for groups, add a 0. I will never forget the first time I heard that. I'm pretty sure that my face looked like this. I was shocked. The first time I heard that from Pastor Rick, he talks about it, where God tapped him on the shoulder and said, I want you to add a 0. You have 300 groups now? Add a 0, make it 3,000. Because when you add a 0 to the end of your goal, it forces you to think differently. It forces you to strategize differently. It stretches your faith. It calls you towards new creativity. So if you're dreaming about 5 groups right now, add a 0 and make that 50. If you're dreaming about 100 groups right now, add a 0 and make that 1,000. This is when you start to redesign that strategy. You work together as a team. You further align. Add a 0. Okay, question 4. So, we've talked about connecting, we've talked about aligning. Well, how do we measure progress? Just because community grows organically doesn't mean you can't measure it. Steve always says Jesus is king. But in small group world, data is king. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. You can't manage what you can't measure. Make sure you're getting the data that is relevant to you. You remember we talked about hard data and soft data? What's the difference?
Quantitative versus qualitative.
Okay.
What makes them tick versus.
Yep, what makes them tick? Okay. Yeah, so go ahead.
Their soft data and our color, what
Yeah.
my color.
Yep, good. Yeah, so hard data, the things that are in your database, they're the leadership training that leaders need to go through. It's the tracking that you need to be able to, keep stats on, etc. The soft data are the stories. It's the spiritual progress. It's the testimonies, not just the stats. Every number has a name. Every name has a story, right? It's all connected. It's about the individual and the whole at the same time. Now, soft data, and we talked about this yesterday, but I wanted to share another example. I actually have reminders go off on my phone when people tell me key events or prayer requests in their life. I do. I just make a memo immediately. I pull out my phone right away. I had a woman recently tell me that she was going back to the doctors because she was afraid that they might have found cancer and she needed prayer. I said, you know what, I'm going to pray for you, and I did it, and I wrote a reminder in my phone. My reminder went off. I stopped what I was doing. I prayed for her. I texted her, and I said, I think that the Lord just wants you to hear this verse. Here's a verse, and I'm praying for you. She wrote back immediately, and she said, how did you know I was walking into the doctor's office right now? I said, I didn't, but you matter to me, and I'm praying for you. I made it an intention to specifically pray for this data. I have reminders that go off about birthdays. I check Facebook every day just for birthdays because I don't want to miss a birthday, because I know how it feels when someone goes out of their way to wish me a birthday. I want to get to know people, and I want to know their story. I want to know what makes them tick. I ask questions like, what calendar dates matter to you? Maybe it's the date that they became sober. Maybe it's the date that they accepted Christ. Our lead pastor, he's got 2 birthdays. He celebrates 2 birthdays because he remembers the day that he almost died on the operating table after his intestines ruptured. Calendar dates are important to people, and soft data is directly linked to spiritual care. Contact and tracking of our leaders from our coaches is so important. If you aren't directly tracking the soft data, have your coaches track the soft data. Empower them to be able to do so. Empower them to be able to use the systems and leverage. I actually, one of my coaches, she did this all on her own. She sent a survey out that was incredible. They were all soft data questions. And I literally said to her, I was like, Tammy, this was the best. What made you think of it? And she said, well, I can't lead them, I can't coach them until I first know them. And so think through creative ideas and how you can track soft data, how you can empower other people to track soft data, and keep a list of it. All right, a recap. How will you align your small group ministry with other church leadership and ministries? How will you communicate the value of groups to your church? What is your plan for connecting people into groups? How will you measure your progress? Failing to plan is planning to fail. We have to plan to succeed and to connect people like Melissa into small groups. Plan in such a way that when God taps you on the shoulder to add an extra 0, you are excited for what He's going to do, and He's going to use you, and you're just saying, Lord, this is your way. Show me how to make it happen. All right, Steve's going to come up, and he's going to work through the planning pages that you have and explain for the rest of the session.
All right, give her a big hand.